We are now going to a provider, a mobility service provider, and with us is Dr. Filippo Logi of Siemens Mobility. Filippo is Director of Business Development in Siemens Mobility Intermodal Solutions, an absolute expert in the topics of mobility, working with public transportation agencies in both North America and Europe for last 18 years with Siemens. And the number of solutions, the number of options that Siemens has to offer and has deployed provides such a rich portfolio. And I think it was a challenge for Filippo to select a few things to tell us today. Finally, Filippo is also representative and talking closely with us in Ertico and in Ertico's innovation platform Mass Alliance on the future of mobility, as well as participant in UITP's combined mobility group. Filippo, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Vlad. Good evening, everyone. Mobility is changing. Well, it has already changed. Transportation offerings are increasingly becoming shared, on demand, and pretty soon will be automated. But the question is whether all this is sustainable. We know that some modes are more than others, some are not. And I guess in order to retain a necessary combination of sustainability on one hand and user-friendliness for acceptance, there's no way around it. We need an intelligent combination of mass transit with other modes, normally flexible, that fill the gaps, to make sure that people find easy and then sustainable ways to access the normally less flexible mass transit system. But how can we achieve that? The first requirement, obviously fairly obvious, but certainly not easy, is the availability of transport services. And this, as Sasha was showing, means not just in the city center, but also in less dense areas. We think that demand responsive transport is a perfect solution for this, especially when integrated with mass transit. A nice example of this integration is an app that we recently launched with DB Regio, the subsidiary of the Deutsche Bahn, which is responsible for regional and commuter services. This app, which is called Wohin du willst now, which is green in this slide, enables travelers to book a demand-responsive transport service as part of an overall multimodal travel plan. Another, perhaps better known example is the Reiseplanen app for Denmark, which I'm told over there is used even more frequently than Google Maps. Reiseplanen includes all public and most private transport mode, so also shared and on demand, all modes available in the country. And perhaps some of you may remember a variation of it called Min Reiseplan, so My Travel Plan, which was deployed for the ITS World Congress in 2018. A lot has been debated about the role of public administration and public companies in offering and managing mobility as a service. I am very convinced that regulation, or an even better word for it is orchestration, is a government responsibility. This is whether local, regional, national, or even a combination of those. This is essential to avoid cannibalization of a well-functioning service, and even to avoid the unfortunately well-known disasters of thousands of bikes or scooters left to rust in rivers and parks of European and North American cities, or even to avoid large numbers of TNCs, transportation network companies, driving, for instance, directly above an underground line. Ultimately, whether travelers decide to ride their car for the whole trip or just, for the short leg to a station will depend on the suggestion on their favorite mass app. And thus the app, that is the interface to the user, has to be all-inclusive with a transparent display of all options, showing all available choices, and not only those owned by a mass operating provider, such as could be Uber, or those, for instance, paying for advertisement space to Google or similar. Therefore, I strongly believe that public agencies have the right and the duty to pick up this responsibility. An interesting example of this is what happens in Dubai, where the Regional Transportation Authority a couple of years ago launched the Dubai Integrated Mobility Platform. The corresponding app is shown in this slide. That essentially provides travelers with integrated access to all transport modes available in the Emirate. Mobility is personal, and different users have different objectives. Thus, it's important that both the background algorithms and the front end offer the possibility to optimize searches according to a variety of different criteria, which reflect the differences amongst the users. These criteria and these objectives include obviously time, particularly, for instance, real-time deviations from schedule, but also can include price or even overall convenience, and finally emissions. Some examples, for instance, in Luxembourg, the Verkehrsverbund, which is the agency responsible for mobility in the Grand Duchy, recently launched an app which enables, amongst many other things, to help travelers select the most environmentally friendly multimodal itinerary. And an example of different criteria is, for instance, given by the Jump app by VBB, which is the Berlin Public Transport Authority, which is targeted specifically to young kids, but with very simple user interfaces and specific buttons. This helps young kids, including my nephew, to travel safely and easily using public transportation. And one thing that we've been noticing in the pandemic, since the beginning of the pandemic, is we've started seeing agencies providing information and even search optimization to minimize exposure to COVID-19 by, for instance, favoring itineraries that on less crowded vehicles or on less crowded lines, or even itineraries with fewer exchanges. And this is my last slide. The whole mobility as a service solution has to be user-friendly in order to gain acceptance. Since the beginning of the pandemic, mobile ticketing and mobile payment have experienced an incredible surge all over the world. In North America and Europe are at least my direct experiences. We've seen really an incredible amount of users wanting to use mobility as a service. Mobile payment, also mobility as a service, but and a lot of agencies wanted to have this solution. But there is user-friendly and there is even user-friendlier. And particularly interesting to this, with this respect, are the various deployments of hands-free mobile ticketing, sometimes known as check-in, check-out, check-in, be out, or variations of these. With check-in, be out, for instance, users don't need to worry about looking for the right tariff, which can be in some countries like Germany and Switzerland, for instance, the very complex issues, or even to actually buy a ticket. Their ticket is essentially uploaded to their phone when they hop on board, and they are automatically checked out when exiting. And oftentimes, the right tariff is calculated automatically by the system, and in some cases with the fare capping or best price option, as it's often called, The user is even provided with a tariff that is best for him. A neat example of this is what happens in Osnabrück, where the public transport authority there just very recently launched the first German check-in way-out system for a public transport operator, which essentially does exactly that, and even calculates the so-called best price option that at the end of the week looks at all performed rides within that week, and automatically computes the most convenient tariff for the user. These are just some examples of how mobility as a service solutions can help make mobility attractive and sustainable at the same time. And with these, I would say I would pass the ball back to you, Vlad. The beauty of it is that the next challenge is just around the corner. So I'd be happy to take any questions at the end of this session. Thank you very much.